Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Pianko. I am a cloud systems financial analyst at Avis Budget Group. I'm joined here today by our TAM.
Hey everyone, my name is Babbar. I am the Senior Technical Account Manager designated to Avis Budget Group based out in Boston, Massachusetts. And we also have Anthony Raiti, who is the Director of Platform and Operation for Avis Budget Group. So if you have really IT-related question, you know where to go, not to us.
Today, I will be presenting on the evolution of FinOps culture at Avis Budget Group. Here's our agenda. I will review some company details. I will then discuss what FinOps is and the 3 phases of FinOps. With Paris' help, we will go through the cloud financial management framework and the assessment that we took last summer and any key takeaways from that assessment. FYI, I will be referring to Avis Budget Group as ABG. We love our abbreviations there, so I'm going to stick with it. All right, so ABG is a leading global provider of mobility solutions. We have Avis, we have Budget, and Zipcar. Avis and Budget are car rental companies. Budget also has the truck rental capability, and Zipcar is the car sharing network. Besides these 3, which make up the lion's share of our business, we also have 11 other brands that complete our organization. With that, we have over 10,000 rental locations in 180 countries worldwide. And we have one of the largest fleets of connected vehicles in the industry. A connected vehicle is a car that can connect to the internet or communicate over the internet. So for instance, you have CarPlay, you have those sensors for pedestrians or any collisions about to happen. That kind of information would make the vehicle a connected car. And with that, we operate most of our car rental companies in North America, Europe, Australasia, and the other parts of the countries we directly do licenses. So what is FinOps? FinOps is derived from the 2 terms finance and DevOps. It's the operational framework for companies to adopt into their technology culture. It's a way for us to manage our cloud costs and usage with the collaboration of cross-functional teams. So you have your engineering teams, you have your finance teams, procurement, business leaders, what have you. They all come together and we all take ownership of our cloud usage and spend. I do want to drill down that it's not the responsibility of one person. It's not just the finance person or the engineer. It's a team effort. There are 3 phases to FinOps. We have our inform, our optimize, and our operating phases. Yes, this looks like a linear graph. However, this is a cyclical process. So we start with our inform phase. It's imperative for a company to understand your cloud bill and have visibility into what your spend is and where it's going. For us, about a year ago, we didn't have that many tags that can identify where the spend was going. For instance, a project or an application, and then a hierarchy of that would be a business unit. If a resource wasn't tagged, how could we know who to contact or act on any recommendations if we didn't know where the resource was attending to? That brings me to the optimize phase. So you need to have the inform phase set in place. You have that visibility into your cloud bill. Now you can actually uncover any of those optimization recommendations that you receive. Whether you see that in the AWS console, you receive it from your TAM, from AWS, et cetera, you can, act on these and then work with the teams to make sure that this aligns with your business goals. For instance, you can have a compute instance that's running on demand. My first thing would go to the engineer lead and ask, is this a fault-tolerant workload? Could this benefit by using a spot instance rather than running on demand? If not, then I would consider, okay, we have a plethora of savings plans in place. Why is this instance not being covered and it's spending on demand? Do we need to increase our savings plan commitment? Or is this an instance that will be shut down in 3 weeks and we don't have to address this recommendation right now? If I talk about RDS database instance, is this instance going to be up and running for the next 6 to 12 months? Would it make sense for us to purchase a reservation? I can't make those decisions based on my knowledge from the data I receive. I have to talk with the engineer lead or procurement or business leaders to make sure we're all aligned on the same page. And that brings me to my operating phase. So you need to have the inform and optimize phases underway, and the operating phase is where you take those 2 and embed them into your daily practice. This is where you meet with the teams, your business goals are all aligned together, and you want to make sure you're going back and forth with the inform and optimize phase. So if you have a new resource or application that's joining into the cloud, You want to first make sure you have tags embedded. That would be under the inform phase. Make sure you can identify where that resource is going, and then move on to the optimize phase. Is this the most effective instance family or instance type, what have you, or is this over provisioned or underutilized? And then again, you go into the operating phase and make sure you embed it into your system. And now Paris will take over the AWS Cloud Financial Management Framework.
Thank you, Kate. So as Kate mentioned about these three phases, right? So now I want to talk about how AWS have built our tool following those kind of phases in mind. So as I mentioned, there will be C phase, which is very similar to what Kate mentioned about the inform, getting those data-led approach, building those monitoring dashboard, tagging and every other stuff there. Then we have save phase, which is the optimize phase, which Kate just talked about. Then we have the plan phase. This is the phase where we do budgeting, alerting, and creating those kind of forecasting based on the new workload as well as the existing workloads. Then we have run phase. Last but not the least, this is very, very important phase, come as a operate phase. This is where the change management actually happen, right? I mean, think of it like, you have all the approvals from your stakeholders and, senior leadership. And based on that, you are following through all the process again. Again, like it's always recommended to have that C phase first, because that way you will have all the data that you have to play with going to the other phases, right? So that's how from the cloud financial framework was divided into these kind of 4 capabilities: see, save, plan, and run. With that said, I want to take a pause and ask Kate a question on how Avis Budget Group have actually leveraged this kind of process, right? Can you share your story about that?
Sure. You can argue, actually, we started in the run phase. The first thing that happened at ABG was we had our executive sponsor a FinOps role. That was the #1 priority, get our cloud costs under control. This was about a year and a half ago. A year ago, I was in the market for a new position, so it worked out perfectly. I've been here for about a year now. And we've done a great job with our optimization opportunities, getting everyone on board in terms of identifying specific people for business units, understanding where our resources are going, and what have you. But yes, that is the run phase. That is the last phase in the process. So obviously we backtracked to first go through C and then save, work through the planning with forecasting and budgeting. That's very difficult to do with a variable spend model of the cloud. And then you go back into your run phase. I do want to emphasize it's not a linear process. Again, it is a very cyclical process.
Absolutely. And this is not just a one-time task, right? FinOps is a journey, right? You won't like do all the phases at one scale linearly and you're just done with it, right? It's an iterative cycle. That's why it's very, very important to have the sponsorship from your leadership when you are following this kind of approach. Yep. Now let's talk about the how part, right? How AWS actually initiate the FinOps journey. We do have an internal mechanism of 44 assessment question. Again, these are not the test. We are not testing any customer based on wherever you are in the journey. This is more like a self-assessment. The questions are very much based on process and mechanism. They are not technical questions. The reason of having this kind of assessment is to bring IT, business, as well as finance all together. Having those kind of questions being addressed, and you do have TAM as well to basically there to support the event and even have the specialists being incorporated if needed. I want to show you one example here. This is one of the example of the C phase about cost allocation strategy. As you see, this is based on like what mechanism are you using for allocating the cost, right? One being like least mature, like you don't have a showback mechanism or for the on-demand as well as for the shared resources. 5 means like you're mostly mature and you do have even a chargeback mechanism in place. For your on-demand spend as well as for the shared resources. So when we do these kind of assessment, we do challenge customer. If customer are picking 5, we definitely ask question. The asking question is not to judge anybody on this. I mean, just to understand like if they are picking a 5, why it is, right? So based on that, you put your notes down there, because when we generate those kind of reports in the end, we need to understand like, okay, so they are mature in these cost allocation strategy and where are they missing and stuff. As you see, the questions are created in such a way that there might be a disagreement, right? Sometimes IT people will come and say like, okay, we do have even show back or charge back already in place, while you see finance people are saying no, we don't, right? So there can be kind of a disagreement coming in place, and this is the whole idea. We don't want to create a fight. Of course, what we want to achieve is like to understand like where are those gaps, to break those kind of silos that usually generate in the companies. With that said, I want to share one example report. This is not the report of Avis Budget Group. Just want to shout it out there. So this is just an example of how once we do these kind of assessment, how the reports got generated. As you see on this report, you might see there is an account management section having a score of 1, and the tagging strategy and stuff is with the score of 3.5. So this way you figure out like which are the areas like on the basis of assessment score to focus on, and that's what TAM and CFM cloud internal team work on it. Fetch those kind of monitoring, and then based on that we create an action plan for the customers. Any questions on this one or any part? Yep.
It's more useful to have IT, finance, do this exercise individually and then review and compare results together, or do it together from the onset and resolve those kind of conflicts in real time?
I think it's better to do it together, because the whole point of those kind of assessment, as I mentioned, is to have those conversation in place, because ultimately we want to break those silos, right? Well, what happened is like, IT will have their own way of how they are monitoring it, and finance would be like, oh, we don't even know how the billings are coming, right? So these kind of questions, as I mentioned, these are not very technical questions, because the reason we wanted to make it non-technical is like because everybody can participate. Business, IT, finance, everyone can participate on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how you guys handle tagging strategy or account, management? Because like a lot of how you figure out how much a team, different teams are, costing.
Absolutely.
Is based on the tags across all the services that they deploy.
I would take a pause here, because I know there is a next slide where we're going to talk about how Avis Budget Group have done this. What are the key takeaways they had? So I would take a pause and then answer. I think Kate can answer that.
Yeah, you might be getting to this later in the presentation, but one of the items on your slides were how to get like the product teams or the engineering teams focus on these optimizations, because they don't necessarily tie to business goals. How have you fostered adoption of your FinOps kind of culture at ABG, given that, right? Was like a kind of a top-down initiative? You said they hired a VP or something of finance.
It actually came from our CDIO. He wanted a FinOps analyst, or at least to start a FinOps team at Avis Budget Group. So having that leverage, it kind of put a fire under everyone to start initiating these optimization opportunities and actually focus on, we need to cut costs rather than let's move everything and spin up everything that we can.
Is that a standing business goal now that like to achieve, or have you gotten to the phase where you're giving these individual teams budgets that they have to manage to?
We're in the process of that. So the next slide, I'm going to jump into like the tagging strategy that I put in. But from there, now we can implement budgets based on the tags. In the AWS budgets, you can make a budget based on like the project name tag or the business unit name tag. So my goal in the next few weeks is to start sending those budgets out. If there's a resource that's spiking up in spend, it's going to notify that person along with myself and Tony and whoever, rather than me going through Cost Explorer and seeing the spike in spend 3 days later.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. With that said, I want to give the mic back to Kate to talk about how Avis actually followed. Oh, there is another question. Sorry.
Yeah. Another question I would probably will ask: how you will differentiate between what you need and optimization recommendations? Because based on my experience, every single software that we use for optimization, it basically provides recommendation based on compute that actually happened without even keeping under consideration what applications that runs on certain, let's say, EC2 instance require. So how you deal with that?
Right. So we usually would see a resource or we would get a recommendation. For instance, is the compute instance. I would then go to an engineering team or a Tony's team, the platform team, and ask, is this part of a legacy application? Those we can't touch right now. It's not to say we can't revisit it in 6 months' time, but that wouldn't be a priority for us. So we would ignore the recommendation. We're mainly trying to tackle the low-hanging fruit, the quick savings that we, as much as we can. But we understand that there are a lot of applications that we don't have the downtime to wait for an upgrade or to wait to optimize it. We have to revisit it at a later time and jump onto something else. Does that answer your question?
The reason I asked the question because we've seen multiple recommendations where the software we were using recommend even to destroy an instance because it's underutilized. So sometimes, let's say you're running database or you're running application and the vendor, it's providing you with a minimum hardware requirements. So even that probably it's underutilized, but the vendor provides recommendation to run on 8 virtual CPUs, you can run it on 2. So, and it's happening all the time. And believe me, we use more than 2 different applications to analyze the usage and analyze and see how it can be optimized. And all of them pretty much the same. They're using the same metrics.
Right. At that point, you just have to pick and choose what you're going to move in on. You know,
Yeah. Also on top of it, like maybe a tagging strategy would definitely be a great initiative to start so that you know like which application is being used where, right? And that's where I come back to like the C phase, right? This is a very, very important phase of building those kind of tagging principles so that you can monitor those workload and then work on the optimization phase. Because I see a lot of customers, what they do is like they go to Cost Explorer and just start working on whatever the low hanging fruit or whatever the optimization opportunity comes up. So that's why we are trying to create these kind of a life cycle where customers should also think about how their visibility into cloud is, because most of the time what happen and we have seen is customer don't even have a full visibility of their cost and usage. So that is definitely I'm going to echo it again, like, you know, definitely look at that C phase and see how your strategy is for monitoring those load.
Can I answer that? Can I answer your question? So if you're running third-party applications that require a certain infrastructure level, you're in a tough spot. You really can't optimize that because you have to, adhere to whatever the infrastructure that service, third-party service is recommending, right? Because if you don't, and something goes wrong, they're going to flag that, and then you're in trouble. So that's something we would never optimize, right? But we optimize very well right now, thanks to Kate, is our application, our underlying infrastructure, where you can have the conversation with your application teams and say, come on, your minimum server node requirement for this EKS microservice is 5 and your max is 15, you're only using 3. Those are the conversations you can have internally and you can optimize there. If you have requirements of a third-party service, there's really nothing you can optimize there because you're required to have that infrastructure.
So I'll give it back to you, Kate, so you can talk about the key takeaways for Avis Budget Group after the assessment. Yeah.
So after the assessment, after a few months at Avis Budget Group as the FinOps analyst, here are some key takeaways. One, the most obvious one, is the mind shift mentally from CapEx to OpEx operating model. As you're moving off the data centers, which has been capital expense, moving now to more a operating expense model, that can cause a lot of, frightening things from upstairs. So we want to assure them that we are on top of it. We are optimizing our costs as best as we can because we do have a lot of benefits moving to AWS. And again, you just want to make sure you're aligning with your stakeholders, making sure you're on the same page because we don't want any surprises. This would be part of the plan and run phases that Paris mentioned before. Next, and the most important one for us was identifying a business unit lead for each of our business units. We refer to them as value streams, but I'll use business units for now. We have about 8 to 10 of them. I forget off the top of my head, but that's a lot of business units to manage, especially when I see the lump sum bill at the end of the month. Where does the spend belong to? Who is spiking the spend during the month? How can I identify that? So gathering everyone together, each leader from the business unit leads, we're able to sit down with them and show them this is what you're spending on a monthly, weekly, daily basis. From that, back to the tagging question that you had before. We had a lot of tags in place. However, as a finance person, they made no sense to me. I just need the name of the project. I need the name of the application, and then what's the business unit that those two fall under. So we reviewed and optimized our current tagging strategy over the past few months. The team has done a phenomenal job with that. So we have project name and business unit or value stream. Those are the two. I wanted to keep it simple to make sure everyone is on the same page with that. With that, you can implement that into the Kudos dashboard. So with the help of Paris, we were able to build out the Kudos dashboard. Along with that, you have two other dashboards that come with it. The other one is the KPI dashboard. I'll take pause here. So the KPI dashboard is great to send to your senior leadership. It's a way to, it's a marker for you to see how well you're doing and your team is doing in terms of optimizations. And it answers a lot of questions that they may have coming back to you and asking what's going on. The Kudos dashboard, on the other hand, is great for monitoring and optimizing your costs. I don't have a picture of it today, but if you get a chance to build it out, I think it's a great opportunity to do so. There's a ton of tabs in that Kudos dashboard. You have the billing one, which is the first one you'll see, and it'll show you your last month spend compared to this month, the percentage change in anything in terms of the highest account spend, etc. The specific tabs that we look for are the compute tabs, the database tabs, and the storage tabs. So Tony and I thought we had S3 intelligent tiering turned on, and it happens when I went into that tab, none of the buckets had S3 intelligent tiering turned on. So we brought this back to the team and asked them to work on it immediately. It's a great opportunity to see any of your optimizations that you may not have addressed before. And after that, from the Kudos dashboard, you can see the low-hanging cost savings opportunities. Those are the quick and easy ones that you can target right away, and you get the teams on board immediately. As we discussed before, not everything can be optimized as much as we want it to. You can see a great lump sum of savings at the end of the day. However, if it's a legacy application, we can't touch that right now. If it's a compute instance covered by savings plans, does it really make sense to upgrade it? It's already being discounted. Same thing, with the databases. If it's going to be shut down in 3 months' time, it doesn't make sense to purchase a 12-month term of a reservation. And that's all I have. The next slide. Hold on, sorry, one more slide.
For the tagging strategy, I was more interested in knowing how you guys enforce to make sure that the teams that spin up the resources, whether it's like a S3 bucket or like an EKS node or EMR serverless or whatever, right? That they know to put those tags that you need in there. That anybody on their team that puts up a resource has the mandatory tags.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
How do you enforce to make sure that all the teams put in the mandatory tags that your dashboards need?
I can also answer this. I mean, usually what we did in Avis is like they have a Terraform script that actually built those infrastructure, right? So we want to attack that, right? That's where the from where the resources have been populated. So what we did in Avis is like we actually tackle and, added those tagging field into that Terraform script. That was for the infrared, and Avis is also a spin of contact center. So on the contact center side, we went there, and that's where we have to manually add those tags, but it's just a one-time task in the contact center thing.
Services of these.
Yes.
Everything we do is IIC through Terraforms. It used to be CloudFormation, but we went to Terraforms. You cannot stand up a resource without those tags that Kate mentioned, those two tags. We just won't allow it. Yeah.
You can look for service control policy, the tagging policy, or
yes.
We can't because we don't have organizations.
Follow-up question to the same. Yep. We plan to enforce tagging.
So we had to go backwards and tag everything. Part of that tagging strategy, which was very difficult, is what Kate led, was to go back to all that infrastructure, find the YAML file or the CloudFormation script, put the tagging in there, and make sure you update everything. But then next time you touch that tagging will be in place. So the biggest effort there, it's not going forward. Going forward is easy. Every Terraform script has that in it. It was going backwards. and then updating, what we ran into, the biggest challenge was Terraform was not updated the right version. We had to update Terraform first and then put the tagging in. So yes, it was about a 6-month process.
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome.
Edit a lot of tags using the tag editor for resources. I mean, if it's not defined in infrastructure code, and you replay that, it's going to rip it out.
Yeah, exactly.
In your CI/CD.
Yeah, we see the drift. And we address it. Especially, it was really, really difficult to go backwards. What this gentleman had mentioned about everything, but that was already existing. You had to go back and retag it and put that in the script. It was a huge effort. But now that it's done, it's showing its benefit and cost savings.
And also on top of it, there is now a feature that being added to retroactively put the tax back to 24. I think 1 year, 12 months period, or 24 months, somewhere close to that. So you can retroact.
There's one slight caveat with that, though, right? That tag needed already be defined as a cost allocation tag.
Yes.
And I think it also had to be on the resource initially or something. There's some weird caveats, but.
I think you're talking about who created it, right?
Yep.
Persona.
You can backfill.
Yeah, you can
that now
backfill
in
retro.
tax, but I think there's some caveats on it.
But it will be only going to be for cost allocation tax, yes.
How do you manage to control and prevent anyone from launching the resource in future without tag? Like, let's say someone is using Terraform, that is your policy. But do you have any SCP policy in place, or the IAM is preventing user from launching just from the
Absolutely. I would let Tony talk about that. I know
That's exactly what we put in place. So we don't allow it to be launched if it's not tagged.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
You use an SCP policy or you use a policy as a code?
One more time.
Are you using SCP policy or policy as a code?
I would love to use SCP, but we started back in 2016 where organizations was not in place, right? It didn't have that structure in place, and going backwards now to get that in place is a tremendous effort, and we can't do that. And we have production applications. We use it through our CI/CD pipeline. It enforces it, as well as the Terraform script.
Because with Terraform, you can use either validation or policy as a code.
Yeah. And we do have that in Terraform, but not SCP as with AWS organizations. I wish I could. Believe me, it would solve would have solved a lot of problems for us, or addressed a lot of needs that we had.
The reason I ask, we have similar issues before because we also started in 2016. And what we did, at least going forward, we actually implement SAP policy where if our required tags are not applied, you won't be able even to deploy resource.
That's the way to do it, actually.
Thank you.
Kate, did you have previous AWS experience before taking over this FinOps role?
Yeah, I've had 2 other jobs where both were involved with AWS.
Oh, okay.
It's a FinOps lead.
Okay. My question there, at least for me, I work with a lot of customers that are kind of thrown in, they're finance, but then they're thrown into this FinOps for AWS, and they're not familiar with EC2 or what that means. Do you have any advice for people in those roles that may not be familiar, like how to get going to where you're at today?
Yes, I was in the same position, actually. I interned at the first company, and I was an IT finance team. I had no idea what the cloud was. Next year, I got hired full time. They threw me right into it, which I'm thankful because now I'm here today. But my advice to that, whoever's in that position, is to look at the white pages, do a cloud guru. There's all these vendors out there that provide a lot of insight into what the cloud is, and it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It took me at least a year to get all the terminology under my belt because I'd be presenting to these tech people that knew exactly what that was. If I'm sitting here like, oh, you can optimize this instance and do that, and they're like, okay, ask me a hard question on it then. So just be patient, but definitely do some research on it.
There are 3 courses on the AWS Skill Builder. You can, if it's someone completely new, you can have them take the cloud practitioner free trainings on Skill Builder, and then there's probably like 4 or 5 free classes on cloud financial management on Skill Builder. And there's a paid one that's like 24 hours. That's like more in depth. So
AWS Academy recently.
Sorry, one question. Like, we have some shared services which multiple services use, like load balancers and other things, right? From FinOps perspective, when you are allocating on your side, how are you allocating the percentages, or are you just blindly doing a average, or how are you allocating that? And second thing, do you have any like container strategy for EKS, where you are getting at a container level or at a namespace level to your customers?
So for the first question, we don't do any chargebacks right now. Actually, the biggest project is one was identifying our spend, what business unit it's going to, so then we can do a show back. So we're not actually charging back anyone, but in terms of a shared service, because we have 4 accounts that are shared amongst all of our business units, the tagging was very important so we can identify who's using what. But for a shared service, I would do a weighted percentage based on the total spend of that business unit compared to what the bill is. In terms of EKS, we do use Kubernetes, but I'm going to jump this one to Tony because he specializes in that.
So I'll answer the first one, also add to the first answer. We do have shared services, Route 53. How do you break up your Route 53 consumption across different businesses? You can't. So what Kate has put together is a consumption line item. It's just cost. It's core consumption is what we call it. It goes into that bucket, and everybody above us understands you can't divide that up. You know, you just can't, right? As far as Kubernetes goes, we've broken down all our business units of what we call value streams by namespaces. So a value stream or a business unit will be represented by a namespace. That namespace, then we do use a third-party product, and I don't know if I can mention it enough, so I won't. That allows us to see the dollar spend within those namespaces all the way down to the microservice. And we'll be able to charge when we do charge back to that value stream or that business unit based on namespace. That answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yep. I just want to end it by saying, like, please definitely reach out to your TAM, CFM, and please, work on these kind of assessments to have started your FinOps journey wherever you are in this stage, right? And we really, at AWS, our core value is to maximize the value of your cloud spend. And that's why we have launched this kind of assessment to help you out.
I will add to that. So after the assessment, we started these monthly business reviews with Paris and team, where they provide us a very detailed Excel file of all the optimization opportunities. So it's a chance for Tony and I to see these opportunities firsthand, take that back to the specific business units, and then address and have these conversations with them. So definitely reach out if you want to have those monthly business reviews. We have that. We also have a quarter business lead review, et cetera. And we use that to share with senior leadership as well.
Do you guys track the savings that you guys are able to generate through right-sizing activities, things of that nature, reservations, and how do you track those savings?
AWS actually has a function that you can see how much you've saved year to date or month to date with savings plans or your enterprise discount, or I think it's, I forget what it's called, a consumption-based discount. So you can track all those savings right there if you wanted to. I don't have a mechanism right now to track the savings.
Anything on the right sizing side for EC2 instances or EBS?
That would be part of like the monthly business reviews files that we receive. So it would give you a list of all your RDS database instances. If you right size them, you would get X dollar savings. That would be your first attempt at tracking our savings with that, I would say.
Yep, the weekly report that I'm sure, right, on the resource utilization side, I think they take this as a benchmark of where they were right now and then how was the next year, next month, or how things were. And based on those right sizing savings amount being tracked basically on those 4 fronts.
All right, anyone for one last question? All right, the rest are for happy hour. Thank you, folks.